Evening, welcome. Okay, stand for the pledge, please. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No, we don't joke about such things.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes that were presented in the packet?
So moved.
None.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Okay, moving on to open forum. And at this point, we would like to invite anybody who would like to ask any questions or make any comments regarding it. I guess not all speak at once. Okay. Are there any agenda changes?
Resignation.
Other than do we have a resignation, Christine, this afternoon? Okay. And moving on to awards and recognitions, which is always good to do. So,
Yes.
Kathy,
Thank
I
you.
ask you to take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and to present the annual Jamie Compius Memorial Award to this year's recipient. 2 years ago this week, Jamie passed away, but prior to his death, he was a very enthusiastic support staff worker for many years in your district. And it pleases me that the leadership team here allows me to not only honor his memory, but to recognize the efforts of this behind-the-scenes group, your support staff, who make our district better, who make the teachers' lives and jobs easier, and make our children happier. My husband Jamie always believed it was important to work hard, but to also fight for the rights and respect and recognition of all support staff employees, and to fill any role whenever or wherever he was needed. Most importantly, Jamie always made everyone around him feel good with his smile and humor. He was also loved by the students, who found it very easy to connect with him. The TCS staff had an opportunity once again this year to nominate one support staff employee for this honor, and they once again chose a middle school staff member. The recipient is awarded this plaque to place in their building and a monetary award. And on the plaque it states, given in recognition of a support staff employee who displays a willingness to help others, has a caring and friendly attitude with a sense of humor, and is a positive influence on students. Laura, come on up. I was so happy to learn that this year's recipient is Laura Durling. Not only have I had the pleasure and support of her work in my own classroom, but when I presented the award to her at school, I asked the 5th graders that were seated before me why they thought she was getting this award. I hadn't planned it or anything, and they responded with the same qualities that not only described Jamie, but more importantly, they very accurately described Laura Durling. Laura is a loving, kind, and generous staff member. She brings in gifts or goodies for the students and staff. She is always able to make a connection with students in all grade levels because she uses her sense of humor and gentleness to encourage young people. She motivates students to try to do their best even when the work is really difficult. She's also in the past willingly served on the PBIS committee in order to support both students and staff. And she's always ready to volunteer to do anything extra to help anyone in the middle school. This is the type of staff member and friend Jamie Compius tried to be, so it is befitting to recognize Laura Durling as the 2016 recipient of this memorial award.
Hold that thing up.
Hold that thing up.
I know I did this before, but the lighting's better now.
Thanks.
If you don't mind, we won't stand.
So you're such a mark.
I'm really retired.
with me when they know they can leave.
When they have it, we gotta get a better script, so we get a better meeting. Okay, then moving on to item 7, presentations, and I think this is by Angie.
Yes, it is.
You can take the floor, lady.
See if the technology will work.
Michael, you
Thank
got
you again.
can you make the projector?
I sure can.
Good.
Pardon me.
You want that light scale?
Yeah.
One bank of light scale? Oh, there we go. What a tease.
That's so much better anyway.
Yeah, that's actually better lighting.
That's good? Try both.
Takes a
No.
Perfect.
If you flip just the other way, because then you're close to the single, so you get a little bit less.
There we go. So you know that as being in New York, or really a lot of states around the nation, as they've dealt with the Common Core, trying to decide what they're going to do for sure, New York State is reinventing learning standards. And while, as I mentioned to you in the board update, that the timelines are slipping, I'd asked Angie to kind of bring an update to you so you can kind of see the process that we're getting involved in and what our teachers will have to deal with as we move forward as a state and with standards.
Before you go,
Yeah.
what's the politics of this? What happens if they chuck the whole Common Core?
They won't.
They won't.
Yeah.
It's that simple?
Uh,
It really is that
They
simple?
won't. It is that simple.
Okay, good, thank you for that. That's all I
Because if
need.
you have no standards, you have no.
That's right, that's what I mean.
So,
Accountability.
Thank you.
All right,
That
so
was
the
nice.
new standards are ELA and math. Certainly has been all over the news. The press has been saying, 60 to 70% of the standards are changing, which is certainly true. But as we go through this presentation, I have a link on here to show you just a couple of examples of how they're proposing that the standards change, and you'll see that they're not dramatic changes. I'd say a good portion, 70 to 80% of the standards would be wording changes. There's some clarifications. They've given additional examples. Some that were cross-grade, they've made more clear where you're exploring in a grade and what grade that's mastery. So a lot of the changes are minor changes like that. But any change that they made, they considered a change. So
And
we'll
teachers
either-
have been involved in this process, right?
Correct.
Formulating
This is
these?
in response to teachers, parents, administrators. You can see in the timeline up here that they spent, it's not up there, they spent most of, and Sarah, you may know more, I don't know, months and months with committees really looking at this before they came out with these proposed changes. And at this point, they're still in the proposed phase. Like Michael said, of course, they pushed back the timeline. So this is the original timeline, even when I prepared this, a week or two ago, that they had come out with. It's now being bumped back. We originally had that public comment period. You'll see phase 2 there between September and October. Public comment is when, we can comment, but what we had done, BOCES said encouraged all the districts to have groups of teachers go in and comment on the changes. So the building principals and I presented, very similar to what I'm presenting to you, to each of the groups of teachers. Gave them access to the graphs that showed the changes and allowed them access to go in and make comments on the changes. That had been bumped back. It was originally September to October, had been bumped back to late November. We had heard that the revisions that the board would be considering it, and revisions would come out in January. That's now, from what I hear, Sarah, again, you may know more, looking more like April and May that those revisions will come out. So everything is bumped back. That's a little concerning because the implementation is supposed to start next year. So if you get those changes in April and May and you're looking to implement those standards changes in September, that's really, we're out of conference days after that and we're looking at, summertime to do that. So we originally had a very solid plan for rollout of the changes. We're going to use the March conference day. We're going to use some summer curriculum time. As I said, with that being pushed back, we just today kind of touched base on we're going to have to come out with a new plan for that. But what I want to concentrate on, I think, is what I heard from teachers. It was almost overwhelmingly positive with what the changes were. And they felt that they were heard. So here's a quick summary of the ELA changes. Majority of the changes were pre-K through second, so really those early learning years. They intentionally went back and put in the wording during play, spontaneous, through play. So they've really listened to the critics who are saying, you know, this is just not developmentally appropriate for kids this young. So keeping those standards, but you're able to teach those through play opportunities. I really encourage you, I will open this link, but to go through it, it's very, very reader friendly. Even someone who didn't know the standards, the graphs will open per grade level and show you previous standard, new proposed standard, and what the change is.
So the approach you're taking to pre-K is right in line with this play meeting.
It almost mimics the presentation.
Yes. A lot of vertical.
Is that unusual to see play recognized in educational standards? Is that sort of?
Well, the pre-K grant requires that you have 30% of their day, don't put maybe 30 to 40% of their day to be
As a standard.
unstructured
As a standard.
play time.
Well, and related to that, we were just having a conversation today at Administrative Council about homework, grading policy, and there's a national, I think, kind of awareness that there's about what's truly the purpose of homework for the little ones. So we're having that conversation this year at all three grade levels, but for pre-K, K1, 2.
I think a bigger deal in K1 and 2, you saw some visible relaxing of teachers when they heard that this was put back in. Another thing that was looked at was they moved some of the standards up a grade level. I don't know them well enough to be able to tell you, an exact one, but maybe if it was long E was taught in first, they really decided we're going to bump that up to the fall of second. Don't quote me on that one, but some of the standards were bumped up a grade. Vertical alignment of the wording across grades, they really found that teachers weren't using similar vocabulary even within the current standards. So a lot of the changes were wording changes. A big one is they clarified explore versus mastery and really intentionally put those in the standards. So if there are standards that are cross grade, it's very intentional. If they put, are you just exploring? Are you introducing that standard? Or are you expecting mastery of that standard in this grade level? They reorganized the writing standards. They say that they're easier to use. I haven't gone into the writing standards as closely as I have the reading standards, so I don't know if I can say much more on that. So this is the link, and this is what really we worked on with teachers and provided them. You'll see you can just go down and by whatever grade you're teaching and look at the standards. So if we look
So
at,
parents can look at this?
Yep. So if you look at, so I opened up, first grade? Yep. You'll see here's the current standard, the revised standard, and then they'll talk to you about what the change is. So if we go down.
So there's no controversy about this kinds of standards,
So if you just look down, it's really user friendly.
right? This is the longest.
Yeah, but it's so specific, everyone's speaking the same thing, so it's really nice.
So teachers were encouraged, and I know definitely that they did at department meetings, to go through this and really look through and make comments if they thought it was appropriate. Our plan still remains that when these do roll out and become the final standards, to work off of these graphs which are user friendly.
When was the last time education saw this kind of a sea change? We've never really tried anything like this nationally. Have we tried something like this nationally?
I think when the Common Core came out, it washed across the country within about 6 months. They decided them within about 3.
Well, they were giving out money.
Yeah, they had
It
lots
was
of.
all race. It was so intimately linked to race to the top stuff. It was hard to decipher all this. There was no money. They were printing money, and they were giving it out to public institutions so that nobody was, everybody had a job.
I think before that, there would be various efforts and standards and various.
But this is
This is more national.
Okay.
At this point, they're not updating the modules that go along, so, the standards are not the actual, the modules, the curriculum they're teaching, they're not updating those at this point. I think that, where we are in Trumansburg, teachers are using those modules as the basis. They're not their Bible at this point. So I don't think that's rocking anybody's world. I think that they're aware of the standards, they're used to referencing the standards and integrating it into what they think is appropriate in the modules. So I'm gonna go back to, I didn't see faces that were like, oh my God, look at these changes. It was like, oh great, this is reflecting what we've seen after several years of, you know, having this in practice. And certainly, correct me if I'm wrong. Math changes. Again, they clarified a lot of the language. They really defined that explore means the concept's being developed. It's not mastery. That's really emphasized throughout. Again, a lot of those cross-grade standards were clarified. Fluency was defined. I heard a lot of cheers with that. You know, if we're expecting them to have fluency, what is fluency? Tell us what fluency looks like.
It's been a debate in our building for years. Right, Sarah? About what does fluency mean in math?
A lot of visual examples. This is actually kind of cool. So for the math, they would say, here is an example. Here's a student example of quality work, what we would consider someone who's mastered the standard. This is what it would look like. So teachers could reference that. The gaps between grades, a lot of that vertical alignment. Geometry had the most changes and was the least well received. I know that John has talked to his staff about that. Allison Pete is working at TSU BOCES, is an expert in this area, and is working with math people on all of the changes.
What's the problem with geometry?
Do you know that?
It's just there's a lot. They've added
They
a
added that
lot
3 to 4 new weeks of those
to-
plus
right.
standards.
and you're already, yeah. We've been teaching it in a full year and you just tacked on 4 weeks of instruction.
And they're calling those
materials.
plus standards. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So-
I'm sorry, I'm pretty sure geometry was around a long time ago, and we've been teaching it for a long time. Did we all of a sudden decide there were 3 to 4 weeks new material that we needed to do? I guess maybe I'm just a dope about it. I mean, that's what I mean, it's not like geometry was invented last week. We've been teaching geometry for the better part of, I don't know, a couple thousand
Well,
years.
it's
What happened? Did they find a new way to measure a right angle, or? I don't mean to be sarcastic, but.
it's essentially a depth question. So if you study world history, it's easier, right? If you think about world history, you can, there's breadth and depth. So how deep do you go into a content?
Well, isn't that the dilemma you have with
So-
every discipline that you teach?
Yes. So, but the question is so ultimately, what is it that students have to know to be successful in this content, specifically related to maybe the Regents exam, right? So if you add more content that could potentially be a part of an exam,
So you're missing my question. Why are they adding more content?
I don't know.
Okay.
No answer? Sarah?
I think they're just clarifying the content that's already existing. I don't know if, I think with the rollout of Common Core, there were new things that were added, but I actually almost see this, more of the work happening with advanced algebra, with Algebra 2, that coursework, where there was extra stuff added there. I almost feel like there's more stuff added to that than to geometry. That's kind of the feedback that I'm hearing, because it's almost taking students a year and a half to get through Algebra 2 versus any other high school math course. So I'm hoping that's where the most of the changes will happen, and then I think just the vocabulary throughout the math standards.
Clarify.
Right.
There's a lot of clarification.
So I pulled up the same graph. I went into grade 3. You can see that they gave a lot of examples. I'm trying to see if I can find a student work example. But it's pretty, right there, you'll see a fluency expectation. Probably can't read it from there. But they've highlighted the changes. They've given some notes, some examples, and then they'll really talk about the fluency expectation. And you can go through this.
Angie, I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting. Can you go back up to there when you were doing the fluency thing? Keep going. So right there, what does fluently solve mean? Is that different than
Fluency.
solve? Or does it require some alliteration of the way you solve it that demonstrates that you know what you're talking about.
So it says there, by the end of grade 3, know from memory all products of 2 one-digit numbers. It's not putting a time restraint on it. And then it has the blurb on fluency expectation. And again, I think people aren't diving as deep into it because they're still under consideration. I mean, they're not out yet, and it could change.
How different is this from what you currently do?
Not much.
Not
A
much.
lot more clarification.
Right, I mean, that's, the idea is these were the Common Core standards, and now these are the new New York standards, and we're basically taking these and tweaking them.
Right.
Finding the areas where, okay, we need a little bit more clarification, we need a little bit of better understanding, and that's it.
And some of the
And-
cross-grade
Commonalities.
ones.
Like, this definition of fluency has ended the debate, the ongoing debate about what fluency is and what assessments we will use, and it just ended it, and now we can move on.
But essentially, the standards are staying very similar, so it's not like we're gonna have to
For
make.
the state of New
Wholesale
York, do you
changes to
imagine
what
this
we're
is a
doing
big
here.
deal for the state of Mississippi?
I'm just not as up on this.
Just for a while, almost all the states adopted Common Core, so it was pretty clear. But there was a lot of pushback over the years.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of states doing the same process, whether they're just going to stay with the Common Core as is, which I doubt they are because there was so much pushback, or are they going to go through some kind of revision process? So,
Which sounds like we're just melding our New York standards with the
and
these standards.
and trying to own them so they're ours,
Yeah, okay.
and then develop assessments that are aligned.
So this is work done all by New York teachers? New York people, I shouldn't say just teachers, but
There's
These are-
actually
these are us.
been, because the majority of the changes in ELA are pre-K2, there was a call for that early learning task force. I actually applied to be on that, so we should find out in mid-December. I'm hoping that I get on that, but they're gonna have a special task force throughout the year that'll meet in Albany several times. Parents, experts, research experts in the area, administrators, teachers, to take an even deeper look at those pre-K2 ELA.
And it's important, right, because we're going to build our professional development around this for a while now. I mean, once we get these in place.
Between May and June, we have, yeah. So this was our plan for the professional development around the standards, because it's been pushed back. Like I said, we need to re-look at that. But I do feel like our teachers are in a good spot. They're aware of the changes. They're not stressing at this point about the changes. I think they have the resources that they need. TST is really providing us with some good resources. Our plan to use the March 17th conference day, I mean, we may still look at the standards, but they won't be out in the form that we needed them to. And then summer curriculum's getting full already, so I don't know how much of our summer time we can devote to this. So to be determined. The assessments will change in 18, 19, I think.
So they say now, I think right now there's no, they want to do it right, they want to make sure that, they take their time with the standards, so you may even see at the Board of Regents that that timeline gets pushed. I don't even know, it might be happening now at the Board of Regents that it's getting pushed, but they're so similar right now that I think, we're already teaching the standards. It's just these small changes that will happen in ELA at the foundation and at the upper level. That informational literature, that debate too, it's continuously going on. How much informational and how much literature. So I think, those things, that work, Beth Dreyer from TSD is actually on that team.
And that's who's feeding, districts the information at this point.
We know her, she worked with us in BOCES, right?
She still does.
Yeah.
She still does.
So she's the one presenting, like me and the other me's and districts, the information to come back in turn.
Frank, you'd asked about a political piece. Jeff Madison was sharing with the superintendents last Friday that his sense is that the Board of Regents right now wants to do things, but then they'll make a decision one day, and then they'll read the papers the next day, and then the third day they'll change their decision. And so the length of testing is an example of that. They were going to make it shorter, then they're going to make it longer, shorter. And then the other thing that's related, we just heard today, talking about science standards. Laura Hines
Yeah.
is here for the STEM committee meeting, and apparently she's been working on them or something, but she said that, she told all of us that they're working on the New York State science standards, but they won't be assessed until 2026. So little bit of a stretch in time there to develop.
A decade.
Yeah, a decade. So our second graders.
Unlike the math where they changed completely over the course of 2 years.
Well, and then, I'm trying to think. Science, they're working on it now. Science is going to change so dramatically.
I think then they're saying, well, we'll wait and assess them after they've had the curriculum for so many years.
Oh, I see.
We'll actually assess what we taught.
So what else do we
instead of
do?
just
Don't we
assess.
have, we don't have a history standard?
There's
There's
some
some new
standards.
social status.
standards.
There's some.
We do have standards for history.
Yeah.
Arts, do we have standards for or arts, music?
Pretty much, there's standards for everything.
Okay.
We do it.
The Common Core is, historically specifically, was ELA and math, but there are, even within the context of the Common Core, there's social studies and science.
Because I'm working with a grad student on the new national ag standards for natural resources and
Those aren't.
plant sciences. And he's using golf courses as models for meeting ag standards. He wants to be an ag teacher back in Michigan. We created a master's program where our horticulture faculty are working directly with people who want to get their master's in teaching, and agriculture is what we specialize in. So this kid came in, he wanted to study golf courses, so I've been working with him. I was sending him around the country looking at these golf courses as environmental models. Then he's creating these lesson plans that meet these national ag, natural resources, and plant science standards that are brand new. Apparently, they have just been completely renovated at the ag standard level. So anyway, I'm yakking. See what I mean? Meetings go quicker when I don't come.
No.
Yeah.
That's a waste of
That is.
What do you teach
No.
your favorite topic?
So that was it. It was just really a brief overview, and like I said, this is what we shared with teachers as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Angie. That's well done.
Exciting.
Any other comments or questions? I just had a quick one, and that is that we had spoken a number of years ago about being able to sort of watch the progression of students as they move through. And are we sort of back to square one now that we're still gathering data so we can compare and contrast, or do we have some kind of a history to be able to look at?
I think that we will have history to compare to. Again, because the standards aren't a wholesale sweeping change, when you look at the change that happened when we went from the old math standards to the new math, to the Common Core math, it was huge. There was a huge change in the way we were doing things, and that's why if you went and asked elementary school math teachers what their experience was teaching math, it was extremely stressful and scary because it was all new. These changes are a shift. They're, as I said before, they're tweaking. We're taking the existing Common Core standards and we're making subtle changes, a couple of tweaks here, some clarification here, so it's not that wholesale sweeping change.
Right, so we can still
And so
compare.
when you think about like the math modules, which have really become what we have used as our reference point for implementing those standards, the modules will be tweaked, but they're not scrapping the modules, but they're not going to maintain them. Sarah, you probably know more about that even than, but my understanding is that they're not scrapping the math modules, and we will continue to use them as a resource as we implement our math curriculum.
Updating them.
We're updating them, there's little, again, it's tweaks, it's not throwing everything out and redesign. It's not like when we switched from math A and math B
Right.
to algebra, geometry, algebra 2 again.
Fine tune.
Or
I
back,
think
course 1,
that's
2,
the
3.
PD, like that'll be the PD work, to look at the modules and go through them and
Yeah.
compare what's changed and what hasn't.
Which I think teachers have started to do on their own, whether individually in their classrooms or as teams. I mean, they've had enough years with the modules that they know what are the essential parts, what are working, what's really linked to a standard, what can overlap, you can't fit it all in, what can you fit in? So I think that this could help guide that work.
When
So
you're
the apples of last year are very similar to the apples of
They are,
this
they're
year.
fine tuned
Yeah.
apples, yes.
I think what's muddied the waters though, and really comparing over the years, is the opt-out. And now really is making it hard to kind of see how we're doing year-to-year comparison. There's been so much change and now so many are opting out. So I think it's made it harder in some ways, especially ELA and math.
And there's nothing that we can do about that. I mean, there's no way to
No,
compensate
well-
for that.
Well, what we're talking about as a leadership team is finding a different measure that we can use. I'm thinking, I don't know, we've talked about STAR, we haven't decided anything, but we're having that conversation so that we really can say how we're doing, because right now it's hard.
Isn't there a better way to communicate to our community about the importance that test is more from a, I mean, I think the dilemma is then it becomes used for labor issues with our collective bargaining partners. That's partly the issue, I think, that gets everybody all worked up. But I think as a tool to determine some level of effectiveness of a curriculum, you guys are always talking to me about properly assessing, right? I mean, I'm sure you're working as hard on that as you are the standards themselves, right? The tools in and of themselves are what makes that work as well, right? You have to be able to assess that
You
skill.
have to make sure you're assessing what you're talking.
That's exactly right. I mean, I'm assuming they're done in somewhat hand in hand,
Yeah.
right? You hope. Have to be.
But the commissioner has expressed a commitment to making the testing much more realistic and reasonable and not.
Well, my point is, we might not be able to do much with the broader New York State issue, but in our community, if we can
Yeah.
have an open discussion with our citizens about the importance of this data, and it should be, we don't want to make it stressful. I mean, we're doing the best we can just to use it to improve what we do, and I think it's just perceived as it's got such a negative stigma on it now. We just have to, if we think it's one measure, before we abandon it, it might be good to try to keep promoting, hey, this shouldn't be as stressful, we don't want it to be as stressful, we're using it to learn, blah, blah, blah. But
Well, as John points out, if they're actually changing some of the testing format so that it's not as inappropriate for third graders, 4 hours a day for 3 days or whatever it was.
Yes.
They missed a mark on this.
The last conference that I went to, the commissioner was there and spoke about the fact that they are trying to listen to what our community, our state is saying, what people are saying. And so they're being responsive to that. So they're working on making the test shorter, more efficient, and cleaning, listening to our community about the standards and saying, okay, what can we do to make these better standards for New York State? So they're really trying to be responsive to the feedback that they're getting and asking for feedback. And now that they've gotten the feedback, they've responded to that feedback, and now her challenge back to us, which was a large group of principals, was you need to get out there and communicate what's changed and what's different to your community so that parents know, I opted out, they listened, and now it's okay to do the test because they've made the changes that we were asking for.
that's a nice message.
So, but that is a challenge for us to get that information out to John Q. Public.
Yeah. Hopefully they'll believe us.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Thank you, Angie. Thanks for explaining the arcane. Okay, moving on to committee reports. Oh, no, I'm skipping correspondence. I don't think we have any correspondence at this point. Okay, committee reports, and the first one is policy, and I think if you'll notice, you've got in your packet, we've managed to sort of address some of the language issues on this particular policy. I need a
So moved.
This is a
Second.
Okay, any discussion or any questions? This is the second presentation. Okay. Call for all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or any abstention? Okay, motion carried. Moving on
I want to
to
mention one thing.
Certainly.
7220, which is about acceleration. We're going to bring that back in January or maybe February. Josh needs to have time with his middle school acceleration team to take a look at the language and really see what's a fit, what's real practice. So we're going to take a little bit more time with that. And I think we kind of really have until March, until it really comes into play if it were to impact any students' decisions about AP, which remember is the high school part of it. So it'll come back.
So the board has a policy on acceleration?
Encouraging, basically it encourages students to take the harder classes within some guidelines.
As a board
and that's
policy.
what we're working on. Yeah.
And I think the current one we have was originally set in 2009, right? We haven't updated that. So,
It's one of those 2009ers.
okay. While we're on policy, the committee has decided that what we need to do is to go through a lot of the policies that we currently have. If anybody wants a copy of this, I've gone through the policy manual, and I have listed the dates when all of our policies were adopted. There's a number of them. There's 70 to 80% were adopted in 2009, which is when the original policy book was accepted or chosen. Many of those
We've always
are-
had one, but that was
Okay,
the
well,
last time we revised it.
Many of those that were adopted in adopted in 2009 don't really need any changes, but they do need to be reviewed. So what we have decided to do is to be able to take a look at them, and if there have been no changes, then to mark them as being reviewed, no changes, and put in 2016. So one of the things I'd like to ask you all regarding policy is just what you're feeling on how old is too old. To me, if it's adopted in 2009, we need to review it.
Is there a policy on how you manage policies?
I'm sure there's a policy regarding policies, yes. But
That's old.
No, I think this is, some of the research I've done, this is actually up to us as to whether or not, we can, if we wanted to, we could go through this, the entire policy book of the year.
Which we did.
Well, the first cut to in my mind would
Much
be,
years away.
unless whatever policies are based strictly as reiteration of law would automatically be updated through Erie BOCES and
Right.
all that
Some of
stuff.
those
And that's what the
Right.
committee does. Yeah. On
Right.
a regular basis.
Right, but.
Right. So then you're saying if ones have been sitting in there and they're not related to school law, but like acceleration, I can't imagine has any school law associated with it, does it?
There does.
It probably does, right? You can't do things with certain things, right? Okay. All right. So,
Meeting thing.
yeah, that's a tricky thing. So you mean to tell me every time a law gets changed, they write a new policy?
I think they
Or-
updated or
or
at least to
updated.
address it.
If
If it conflicts.
So the
There has
question
to
is,
be a line.
what are we updating that isn't updated for us by Erie BOCES? Isn't that what we pay
Well,
them to
what
do?
happens is often, well, they want us to look at it, not just, take it from the email and have Tina print.
Right.
So there is some conversation, so there's awareness. But often, as with the policy we reviewed on Thursday around Title I parent and family engagement, we have a policy, and yes, we should adopt new language, but this one asks us to customize it to T-Burg. So Josh and Jeannie and I and Angie are working on, so we're making lists of the things that we actually are, sample things of what we are committing to do to increase our Title I parent family engagement. So we actually end up customizing a lot. And then sometimes it's happened more than once where we've taken their suggested policy and we really like some of our old policy language from T-Burg, so we'll blend the two together. So that process.
Well,
takes
if we
time.
start doing that, then it seems like you need to review these things regularly, because things change.
I
Well,
think Jane has a
one
good
that she
suggestion.
suggested.
It raises awareness.
Right,
It
one
has
that
to
I
go
pulled
back.
out were credential options for students with disabilities. That was something that we were talking about beforehand because some of the information from the laws changed. However, also involved with the idea that we're trying to give our students more opportunities for a work-study program, we have policies that do not reflect where we currently are. So in order to be able to make sure that they're in alignment with what we're actually doing, which I thought would be a novel idea, to have a policy that explains what we're doing. There are a number of these that need to be reviewed. In addition to that, I also discovered that some that where we have, with the DASA Act, that there were several others that have not been reviewed but need to be looked at to be in alignment with that one. So it doesn't really make sense when you've reviewed something and you've adopted it in 2014, but 3 other policies that directly relate to it are still hanging out in 2009. So part of this is, as I said to you, what's your feeling on how old a policy we're talking about? Generally speaking, I think they should be reviewed at least every 4 years.
Seems reasonable to me.
I think I can't remember what we agreed on way back then, but it was 4 or 5 years.
But that's, Norman, you have
Well, there's-
how many policies do we have?
Actually, it's not as bad as you thought it was. It took me about 2 hours to be able to go through and take a look at it. Not through
There's
the entire
6,000
book.
policies.
No, there's 635.
635.
Of the
And
policies.
that's not a lot?
So there's probably.
Well, that's not
Well,
635
that's a lot.
policies.
It's probably.
That's enough.
It's like 450 policies.
It's even a big number in my world, Frank.
Can't even budget for that. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I love you, Jane. Here's what I think every good board has a policy wonk. I mean, to my opinion, everybody's gotta have somebody that sort of does that.
Yeah.
I don't know what's a healthy view. You got a view on this?
I think minimum 5 years.
5 years. Yeah, that was-
Well, there are some here that I'm going through and I'm going, ooh, ruh-roh, because it says this will be reviewed every year, and the last time we looked at it was 2007 or whatever it was. or not 7, but
No,
2009 or 10. So I think we need to be a little more attention, a little bit more attention to it. And I hate to be the nerd, but
Well, the fact is, the policy is what
It's
guides the whole
guides
ship. Yeah.
So maybe
I think we need to
a
get-
big effort this spring, we talked about doing it in a half day, just really focusing in. I've done this before, and you can fly through a lot of policy if that's all you're doing, and you get your head all the way into it, and you start thinking about just policy. Maybe we could just get through it this spring and then set a revolving, so you're not having to do all of
And
it.
I would even say some of the digital things, I bet you've got to review them even more frequently, how fast
that
technology
was
changes.
about for media and
Maybe
for
we could-
websites.
Exactly right, I mean, when you start
Websites.
talking, yeah, I think that's the
Yeah, I
one
think
that's
the one we
gonna.
did for the media was back in 2011. We need to look at it again because they've
Cool.
changed so
We could get
rapidly.
into trouble.
Before they had
Every 6 months.
early school.
Okay.
So we're working on it.
Okay, then, moving on to food services. And we had a good meeting with Beth, and at this point, numbers are up, not a tremendous amount, but they are moving in the right direction. And one of the things that we did discuss is to be able to come up with different kinds of menus, but we need to sort of gradually bring our students along to perhaps develop a bit of a more sophisticated palate.
Which we can do as they go through the grades. We'll start pretty basic and
Hummus evidently didn't work in the elementary
Nope, does
school.
not work. in
I was
elementary.
apparently the only one who was eating it.
I think the teachers
Well,
mentioned
you were the
it.
one who was skewing the distribution.
You can't eat that amount of hummus.
No, I went in, I said, "Oh, my hummus," and they said, "No, we don't have it anymore." I was the only one eating it.
Yeah, I was tickled pink to see it and went, wow,
I
yum.
was too. Sure did.
And it was good hummus.
And they put it in a whole pepper.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe you could
it's really pretty.
They don't have it.
Well, they're not
How's
exposed to it
a
at
seven-year-old
home,
gonna eat a whole pepper?
Well,
Probably not.
I'm
That's
just
a
gonna
good
throw that out
question.
there.
I don't talk about
that's the best.
I don't eat a lot of pepper.
I see at my house a lot of
Just
mess, I'm gonna say, right?
So what numbers have gone up,
I think I have my own
participation
menu.
or money?
Well, no, actually, a number of participation.
Margin or volume?
One of the statistics that we have is that 40% of our students actually buy the lunch on a regular routine basis. And of that 40%, about 90% of it is free and reduced lunch. So we have a certain demographic that is consistent, but we're beginning little by little to be able to attract people who normally would not necessarily.
Well, let's also, let's
So we're
not.
serving about 41% of our school population at this point. And
So 410
about
kids a day.
32% of that population are free and reduced students.
32% of the
And
40.
your question,
Right.
to your question.
Not 90%.
Meals per labor hour, which is really the measure of
Of
how
the
efficient
entire
you are
population.
financially.
32% of
Right,
the
but the
population.
majority
Yes.
of the 400 a week here.
They're all eating.
Yes.
Okay, so 90%
So,
of the
so
40
let's,
is
let's
free.
not
Yeah,
miss the
it's
fact that.
90% of the people who actually are doing it, not 90% of the entire population,
Correct.
so.
But that's a really important meal for those kids.
As
So
is
we gotta make
breakfast.
sure it's as good as it can be and that they eat it, so it has to be palatable as well as nutritious, because if they don't eat it, then.
Right,
they're
we
not
also
getting
addressed
anything.
what some people were complaining about for waste, and I think Kimberly came up with a very, very quick and dirty solution to that.
Bring it to my pigs.
No.
That's funny, because that was recommended in the consultant
We
report
take
a
that-
few
I'm sure it
years
was.
ago.
We take the
Because
sure save produce
anything is better
codes.
than throwing it out.
Well,
I'm
we
sorry,
can,
Gary,
we
you
can
keep wanting to say
now,
something.
Well, no, go ahead.
we can now, as long as it hasn't been touched, and it's
Recycle.
it's salvageable, so we are able to reserve.
Right.
So we're able to, anything on the line that wasn't taken, we can package it properly and store it properly, and then the next day it can be put out again.
Which is good.
Maybe your hummus is there after all.
Not for the elementary
It's in the back of the
school.
fridge, in the back.
What's your question here?
Well, a couple, so I guess I'm still unclear as to whether we're feeding more kids, and
Yes.
if that is one of the numbers that is going up, is that because our poverty students in
Let me just stop you there.
at free or reduced lunch number is going up?
We're feeding a small increase in number of students. However, at this point, we're unable to determine what the reason for that is. So
Okay.
we saw a slight increase going in the middle school, and we're uncertain at this point, is that because there's a fifth grade bubble and there's more kids now in the middle school? Could be, because when I say we're serving more kids, it's between 10 and 15 more meals per day. So statistically, it's probably
And
insignificant.
about 10 to 15 less in the elementary school.
Correct.
But why? Because if fifth graders left, we don't know.
Right.
Seems like.
And some numbers are slightly up, however, not up significantly.
So is our revenue going up across the board? No.
But we are more efficient.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, haven't
So-
we improved the
Yeah,
efficiencies in
she's
the
managed to
operation?
reduce what we have to subsidize the nutritional program. but
So we're
it's
just not
a lot.
losing as much money.
Yeah.
It's not that we're making money, we're
And
not
we can
losing
bring
as
a
much.
report to the board. It'd probably make more sense to do that in January or February, when we've had a significant number of months in the school year to report out in terms of revenue against expenses. And many of you are aware that as we've had individuals resign from the school lunch program, we've chosen not to replace them because we were overstaffed in terms of meals per labor hour, as the consultant had pointed out. So we have moved to a transport model. Most of the meals are coming out of the elementary building. However, at the last board meeting, we did change 2 of the positions to senior food service helper, which has allowed us in the 2 outlying kitchens to have at least 2 individuals take more of a lead role. And there is some baking of items, some batch cooking of the items that don't transport well. I'll just share a little story. The other day I was in the middle school and I saw mozzarella sticks as the main entree, and I have to say I just didn't really think that that was okay. And so I started going around immediately. I started surveying all the little kiddos, and much to my surprise, it was thumbs up across the board. I had 2 kids tell me not really something they would eat. And I, of course, looked at it and thought, this is an appetizer. I would never, ever serve that as a meal. And it meets the USDA guidelines. And sure enough, these kids wanted
My
it.
son's been right all these years.
And when I spoke to Beth about that and said, I am shocked, actually I'm appalled, that this is a main meal. Often you would see this as an appetizer, not a main meal. I'm so disappointed by this, and I was completely wrong. However, I'm still not really willing to settle for that because I want something better for our students. So I asked Beth to next time serve that as a side to something else that appears to be an entree, like spaghetti or something of that nature.
It's got a red sauce, it comes with a side of vegetables, is it really any different?
Other questions, Gary?
Angie was putting people at gold.
And you will see the change in the consent agenda where 2 people have, their positions have been renamed. So that's where they're resigning from one position and they show up as being a senior food service.
Salad bar is more attractive. There's more offerings on the salad bar. Beth is continuing to introduce more fresh fruits, vegetables, tap into the local market a little bit more. So where we can, we're pushing more of the healthy choices.
And she's forever checking out new, trying new offerings, ordering a small amount of something.
I'd still like to
Just
see
give it a
that
shot.
grown a little bit, and
Right.
she's working on them, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is the classic case of you can bring the hummus to the child, you cannot make the child eat the hummus.
It's not gonna happen in the elementary school. They're not even
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay. All right, moving on to Douglas. You have a BOCES report for us?
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm up. Okay, BOCES report. I should just ask you to give it.
See if you're listening.
I'm just kidding.
I'm gonna get a BOCES.
Feel as if I'm in a bit of a hot seat here. Oh,
You
well.
take great notes. I'm not worried about it at all.
According to Jeff, some changes to ESSA, as I have finally been convinced to call it, ESSA, particularly around timelines. and instead of submitting, I think we kind of touched on this earlier, in March or July of 2017, the deadline has been moved back to April or September. And in addition, accountability will not apply to schools until the 18-19 school year, allowing a full year for thoughtful, hopefully, implementation and professional development surrounding that. In addition, the new federal administration has, of course, the option of repealing or replacing the regulations that are currently in place, which may make things interesting, who knows. The BOCES board held a vote on our proposed building project and elected to include only work related to infrastructure needs which must be repaired or replaced, i.e. high voltage buried electrical distribution transformers, campus-wide paving. We're also sort of trying to kick off a rideshare program to reduce the amount of parking on campus that we're doing now. Our parking spaces are becoming pretty limited and we have a lot more people zipping in and out. So it would be to in our best interest to try to do a little more ride sharing. Let's see, we are looking at replacing and upgrading HVAC systems in all 5 buildings and replacing all original doors and windows, those that were original to the first building project, still remaining, and they are now officially out of code, so they must be replaced. And it looks as if this will probably be coming to a vote to us in late April of 2017 from the sheet. That kind of looks like when it's going to be done, okay? Then Central New York. I attended the Onondaga Cortland Madison BOCES annual dinner where Regent-elect Liz Hawkinson spoke to issues facing the Board of Regents. She's replacing former Regent Tony Botar, who has retired. Regent Hawkinson's history is that she taught in the Syracuse schools for 32 years, so she's very familiar with the Onondaga, Cayuga area. Cortland, excuse me. Let me see. She claims that to her, the most important step the Regents can take at this point in time is to listen to the educational community and to all sides of any issue, and to draw attention to examples of schools that are really working and do their best to replicate these schools across the state in situations where that would be appropriate. No 2 schools are truly the same, I would imagine. She also drew attention to the Brothers Keeper initiative recommended by the Board of Regents. This, I think, is still in the sort of dreaming stage, isn't it? I don't know how.
They put out some grant proposals.
Feet on the ground.
People responded to and they haven't awarded it.
Yeah.
2 months late on
Oh,
awarding.
dear. Anyway, it involves identifying young men of color who have not achieved well and preparing not only teachers but also communities to engage and support these young people in their effort to become working, contributing citizens. Let me see. She's excited about the challenge of the research piece, dealing with accountability and standards, finds it frustrating to plan without knowing what the financial piece is going to be, which is certainly one of our frustrations. She's a very thoughtful woman. I was very impressed at the fact that when I asked a question, she often doesn't, she thinks on it for a minute or 2 before she gives an answer. I was really impressed by her. She was a lot of fun, great sense of humor, but a very thoughtful, caring, and certainly educational competent individual. It was really nice to meet her. Finally, in discussing issues the schools around my table were dealing with that night, and we all have our issues, but I learned that East Syracuse Manoa, which is a school I've always held in great regard, and which just won one of the tech awards from, come on Douglas, NYSBA, is currently dealing with the challenge of students who speak a combined 84 languages. Can you imagine? Just trying to find staff to handle that. It's really a problem, but not uncommon in many of our larger cities. So we have our issues, they have theirs. And that's it.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Any
You're
questions? Other than reeling over 84 languages?
Country board stocks.
Not all the Roman alphabet, I would imagine, either. Okay. Move on to the administrator's report.
Yes, we had a superintendent's conference day last Friday, and also Jeannie had parent-teacher conferences, and this morning we were kind of reviewing all the topics and that the middle school, high school staff, and how the conferences went. And it's really interesting what's going on in our buildings, and I thought I'd ask the principals to just briefly review what they're talking about and some of their goals that relates to the goals for this year. So we'll start with Josh.
Okay, so the middle school, our focus around faculty meetings and superintendent conference days this year has been around high-quality learning, assessment, and feedback to our students and parents. This conference day, we took a look at where our student comment codes are currently for the report card. There's been a number of teachers who've approached me over the last few weeks requesting additions or modifications. And to really kind of like policies, it's time for us to revisit these comment codes because most of them aren't very actionable codes. It's your kid is great, your kid is awful, and there's nothing really useful about it. Pleasure to have you in class. Needs to use agenda, disrupts learning of others. And those are pretty familiar codes. So what I anticipated was going to be a kind of a quick review, diverged fairly quick with the staff in that they, in a very positive way, is that we were talking about having the comment codes being actionable comments that facilitate a growth mindset. And the majority of the staff at that time started asking, well, why don't we just move to a standards-based report card at the middle school? How quick could we do this? Could we do, it's like, well, I love the enthusiasm, but that's not gonna happen today in the 1 hour we have for this piece. So that's something that the staff has agreed that they'd like to pursue further. And so we'll be continuing this Wednesday at the faculty meeting to look at the feedback just from the comment code review and then setting up a plan for what the timetable might be for developing these standards-based report cards for the middle school. It's something that I was hoping to head towards in over a period of maybe a year, but they jumped all the steps and just went right to the end. Like, all right, so let's go to we're also, they also started reviewing some materials around developing assessments and looking at how, again, it's lining to the standards. Are we assessing what we set out to assess? So do our assessments, are they conveying a clear message to the students that they know what they need to do on the assessment to demonstrate the knowledge? We are finding sometimes when students take a test, it's not that they are unclear on the content, it's they're unclear of what you're asking them to do for that task. So if it says to describe or explain or list or provide examples, they sometimes start answering the wrong direction. So that's something that we'll also be working on. So building safety team met for 3 hours reviewing the FEMA's incident command system for schools and looking over what our different roles would be depending on various scenarios around campus and the buildings. And we found that we just were not as clear as we thought we were. So we're going to be trying to do little tabletop 15-minute exercises once a week, just kind of throwing out different scenarios and then seeing how we would respond to it, thinking on our feet so that we're a little bit more versatile. The department and grade levels, they met and did a little bit of planning. Some of the acceleration teachers met, but I wasn't able to be part of that conversation because we were doing the FEMA training. And they're starting to review the process that was in place this year and identifying concerns, hurdles, and stumbling blocks for the on-ramp and off-ramps for our acceleration process. That when we meet later in January, that we'll be able to keep going. Mentors and mentees also met for about an hour. We have 8 people in the building. We have 4 new staff and 4 mentors. And we went through and shared the onboarding process, how it's been going this year, as well as different resources that they've been drawing from with their counterpart so that we're all on the same page. And the last piece Staff also went in and started looking over their curriculum matrices that they produced last year and see how they align to what they're teaching this year and if there's any adjustments that need to be made. So, very full day, but it's good work.
It's a lot.
Thank you.
So before I go on the conference day, I just wanted to share quickly, we had a number of students from the district participating in the 2016 Human Rights Competition. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that, but it's an arts competition where students submit poetry, artwork, video submissions. This year's theme was on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We had several award winners. Senior Hannah Hertzler had a first place in the art category for her entry called Article 14. We had a first, second, and third place and an honorable mention from our high school in the poetry competition. Emily Miller placed first with her poem Blinded. Maybeck McCann wrote Haiku of Human Rights, Article 1, placed second. Mallory Conroy took third with Deception of America, and Gail Burke with her poem My Home received an honorable mention. We also had a team of students from the middle school that received an honorable mention for their 612 film on human rights titled Life as a FINA. And that included Josh Kniebel, John Wofford, Nico Soester, Eric Davis, Gavin Redmond, Nick Kniebel, and some kid, Noah, how do you say that? Is that pronounced Cohen? So very, very proud of those kids.
So the film, how long is it?
It's just a
Can
short.
you show it at the board meeting sometime? Wouldn't that be cool to watch a video at the board meeting?
They're your
Get
guys.
the popcorn?
Next,
We can get our hands on it.
Alright.
Most of that group was part
Tina
of the
tweeted
group
it.
that won last year as well.
Yeah, they went on,
They're
they went on.
just second place last year, so.
Can I try it
So
again,
this-
John, was,
What was, I'm sorry?
the title of the film was,
Life as a FINA?
Athena?
Life as a FINA.
F-E-N-A or Fina?
F-E-E-N-A.
Qu'est-ce que c'est? I have no idea what a Fina is. Is it
Guess
supposed to
we'll
be?
learn.
Well, guess what? We'll have to-
Yeah, personal.
Here we go.
Have to watch the movie.
So for the conference day, the high school's focus was on action research. We have 4 teams at the high school that have been working together over the course of the year, beginning with our first conference day. The themes for our groups are instructional technology, student wellness, student engagement, and cultural diversity. And each team has created over the course of the first part of the year action or SMART goals with real actionable work that they want to create. The instructional tech team is focusing on examining the state of our current one-to-one program, practices and usage, looking at iPad versus possible switch to Chromebooks, which is a hot topic. And then also looking at Google Classroom as an alternative to Edmodo, which has been one of our primary sources for communication with families and students. The student wellness group focusing their research on student wellness, stress, coping. They're going to be surveying students and teachers and are looking to create programs to help students build resilience and coping with all that they're focusing on. Student Engagement Committee is just doing work on best practices. They've been doing a literature review and they're planning to do a survey of the staff as well. Our cultural diversity team has already done some travel. They've visited the Gandhi Institute up in Rochester as well as the Wilson Magnet School. And they're looking for, again, actionable programs that they can implement in our school to promote cultural diversity and celebrate the diversity that we have. So it's great work and it's really exciting to see. And again, it's one of the great things about this community because you can take a group of great teachers and put them and just say, go do cool stuff, and they do the most amazing work. So it's really exciting. So all of these guys at our last conference day in March will be presenting to each other as a staff. So we'll do a full day celebration of the work and come up with recommendations for our school moving forward.
Is every teacher on one of those committees?
Yes.
Nice.
It's there.
They get to self-choose which.
Yep.
which one.
We brainstormed about 30 different topics and then narrowed them into themes, and then everybody submitted. We did a Google form survey and everybody selected what was their top 2 choices, and then they were assigned. But, so it's really cool because they're studying things that they're passionate about.
All right, so my day was a little different because it was parent-teacher conferences.
Drop the mic.
Yeah, I was gonna say. We had a huge turnout, which is not, different than usual, but it's just really nice that families make the time to come in. Most teachers I've talked to either had 100% attendance or had one family who didn't come and they were rescheduling. So really good attendance on the part of families. Timing wise, it's a really good time of year for us to check in with families. Also, find out about, heat and do they have hot water and what do they need over the long break. And so we did a lot of supporting families. Counseling team was very busy in very subtle and compassionate ways. So I'm very proud to be part of that team. So that was our very busy day and a half working with families. And I have a couple other things that are not related that I wanted to share. So Allison Peak, who is one of our wonderful math specialists at BOCES, was working on a math textbook, and she had some input from some of our teachers, and she wrote this letter, and I thought I would just read the letter to you and then pass it around so you can see that our teachers are thanking it. This was to Mark Baxendale and Whitney Dennis, and would have also been to Mary Jean Richmond if she hadn't retired. So it was the three of them who helped. Enclosed you will find a copy of Math in Practice, Teaching Second Grade Math for you to keep. I think you'll recall collecting and sending me student work samples for the text in the spring of 2015. The series was officially released on August 11th. The rest of the series is available. Once again, thank you for your willingness to support this project with student work samples. Seeing and analyzing student thinking provides an additional layer of understanding for the readers. In this resource, you will find problem-solving strategies, ideas to increase fluency, literature links, activities for centers, and ways to check for understanding. I think that it will be a nice complement to the curriculum you are using. I hope you find the ideas presented to align with the goals of your district and classroom. So just a really nice thank you for our teachers. So now, of course, I should have figured out where it said thank you. Well, while I'm looking for that, I also have a really cool thing that I saw our students doing with Don McDonald in the computer lab with QR codes. And Josh is going to help me. Sarah's thanked in here too. There it is right up at the top.
This is.
Jeannie, is that, first, I think that's amazing that someone locally wrote a text. So is that just being used in our region?
It's a Heinemann series, so I imagine it would be used by any school.
Some textbooks we normally use.
I'm so glad I have a tech team.
Shh, they're focusing.
Okay, any questions or comments?
We're just bringing in one little thing.
Oh,
Just come on. We got one more show and tell thing.
Sarah Ruckus. There you go. What was that?
Do you want to come back to me when it's all?
It looks like this. I think that was fun. Let me just see if I can show you.
We're trying to put it off Apple or on Apple.
It'll be totally worth it if it works.
Sorry, this is a surprise.
Yeah, we needed to do one.
Well, Michael, well, take some time, pressure off you. We can, are there any changes to the consent agenda? Okay. Need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed, any abstentions? Okay. Here, that.
I didn't keep that.
All right, well, we'll just move along then. All right, moving on to 12, new business. I need a motion regarding the certification of evaluators.
So moved.
And a second?
Second?
Okay, any questions or comments about this? I think, Michael, you've explained basically what this is about.
Just one, it's on my to-do list to print off all the assurances I signed off on, and I'm gonna give you a number, because I know you want to know, but this is one of many, 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 many assurances around APPR. So
That's the 3012. That's the education law 3012.
Yes, 3012D, so.
Okay, I need a motion.
There's a link, so I don't know if that one.
We did.
I'm sorry.
Oh, we have to do.
Okay, then all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Because I have a feeling that
On the back.
Moving to item D, acceptance of the draft budget calendars. Any motion?
So moved.
And a second? Any comments, questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Okay, item C is acceptance of the student transportation program. This is review draft.
So moved.
Okay, this is the one, okay. You get an opportunity to take a chance to take a look at what Joe has provided for us.
It's very detailed. I'm gonna need some more time. We're gonna need some more
Yes,
time.
we are.
We're not in a rush for anything.
We're not. However, as I mentioned in my comments to the board, what we thought was a draft really is the final. And what we were considering for about a day and a half was whether to weave Joe's first comments into the report as a response. And we decided it would be better to let them stand separately. And so at that point, it became a final report that I'm hoping that you will, have a motion to accept and then task Joe, Kimberly, and myself with presenting an action plan at the February board meeting to accomplish the many, many, many recommendations, but also to begin implementing one of his suggestions, Mark Walsh's suggestions we already implemented or we're implementing around double checking who's on the Tuesday, Thursday after school buses. We didn't have a really good plan. We had sort of a plan, but now we have a much better plan. So already we want to begin to implement, but I want you to
Well, it seems to
officially
me that
authorize.
this has got to get discussed we actually do have a transportation committee, don't we?
Right.
We do, we
Yeah.
haven't
So
met for a long
We
time.
haven't met, maybe it's time, because it seems like this is something you want to get just a few heads talking a lot, rather than a lot of heads
There's a
talking
fair
a lot.
amount of policies too that it addresses, which you really need.
Right,
Yeah.
so we should be, if your target for getting you action charged is February, we got committee meetings we can set to do it, yes?
Yeah. Yes, we'll have a
Let's do that.
transportation
Can we
committee.
start with that?
Yeah, but I would honestly, I'd still like the board to accept the report as
for
final
sure.
and task us.
Yeah,
with-
but it is what it is. I
with
mean,
the
it's-
transportation committee.
Are there any deal breakers in this thing? I mean,
No.
Yeah.
You
it's
just
similar to
really
the food
accept-
service thing,
Yeah, you
right?
would just really accept the report so that we
Well, we have
would
food
use that
service.
document to move forward.
There,
Doesn't
I don't know.
necessarily mean that you're
It's
going to
acceptable.
implement everything he's
Yeah.
talking about, but this is
Absolutely.
allowing them to be able to say, okay, this is the recommendations, what are we going to do about them?
So, we're ready for
So,
it.
Yeah.
okay, so I think we need to accept it and then task them with going forth.
So
To
moved.
accept?
Second?
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Or any abstentions? Okay, Michael, you've got it. Take it and run.
I'll text Joe, I think he's been working on it at home.
Okay. Okay, and I think it was the whole text was in your board packet, and I would recommend that you take a look at some of the board policies regarding transportation, because they do address that. So, okay, moving on to item D, which is a tenure appointment for Michael Roca.
So moved.
Motion. Second?
Second?
Okay, and we have a nice letter from Josh regarding this. So, any comments other than say thank you?
And congratulations.
And congratulations. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
What?
I'll abstain.
Okay, one abstention. Okay. Congratulations, Michael.
Thank you.
And item E is an acceptance of a donation from where is this from?
The PTO?
Oh, for the middle school PTO, in the amount of $2,500. To
So moved.
replace tabletops and cafeteria tables. And a second?
Second.
Okay, already say thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, are these enough for students to be able to be dancing on them?
I don't think we'd recommend that.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe peanut butter, but not it.
Okay, peanut butter and everything. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? And thank you to the PTO.
Yes.
So item 12 is the addition that we have. This is the resignation of Deborah Brown. And that would be on December 22nd of this year, correct? I need a
So
motion.
moved.
Second.
Okay.
She took a position at BOCES.
What?
Posey's coached her.
Whoa.
I didn't know you
So great.
Dr. Manson, so sorry.
What part of cooperative educational services is
I wouldn't have cooperated. I will very much miss Debbie. She is 100% a very dedicated and hardworking employee. We will miss her.
Wow, what will she be doing?
I believe accounts payable and payroll to some degree.
Is
I'll
this
take it up
a,
with y'all later.
is this a position at BOCES that we're not able to make a counteroffer to?
I had conversations with Debbie and her mind is set, so.
Okay.
Good for her.
Good for her.
Not so good for us.
She's a good one.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carried. Okay, moving on to board forum.
Do you want to do our little
Yes.
demo? Okay.
Yes.
So, I know you've been holding your breath.
Does it work?
What, can you tell us what this is, rather than make us?
Yes,
There's the
What
Yes.
is this thing?
so, well, I haven't done it yet, but,
Okay.
so,
I read all my notes on the projector.
okay. So this is a QR code, and the students have made videos, and so they send home the, how do you, where is it,
You
Josh?
gotta put it in front of the camera.
But there's a thingy right here.
There's a thing in it.
We're approaching
Josh,
it.
here we go.
Okay.
That's why.
Oh, what? No, it's.
Oh.
What does it do?
Wait, wait.
Go onto the internet?
Apple TV
So the
went
next
off.
time I say, let me show something cool at the board.
Apple TV went
Oh,
off.
wait,
Always test the technology before you present.
Absolutely.
Well, no, it's, I think it's trying to
it?
respond. I think it is trying to
It says
respond.
open URL.
So you can go back if you'd like.
Oh.
There we
So
go.
what it is the QR code reader reads from the iPad camera and it looks at this little barcode symbol. And so once it falls in frame, it will immediately connect to a link.
And hopefully it will go
And then
into
you
the
click on the
URL. Here it
URL.
comes, here it comes. Maybe.
It fell out.
Did you put it?
Hold on, it's coming. So these are, so this is how parents can see some of their student work. Hold on, this thing keeps falling out.
Whoa.
That's so cool. It just
You
comes
did
over
this
the
during
URL.
parent-teacher stuff?
That's so cool. That came
Okay.
over like this. I'm thinking,
Okay, so now watch. Do I have sound, you think?
Continue doing this then?
Okay, so here comes one.
First grade.
It's first grade?
Cool.
Oh! Look at the mouth moving.
That was
So-
actually the student.
That was the student who wrote it. The student researched it, wrote it, recorded it, and then made their little video.
Do another one.
That is cool. What
Another
grade?
one?
What grade?
This is first
Yeah,
grade.
now we know what to do. Watch and listen for it.
It's
Let's
a first grader.
These are 6-year-olds.
Here comes Lila.
Told you it was worth that.
Owls hunt at night. Owls can turn the head all the way to the back. Owls are so quiet when they fly. Oh, they're back!
And there's some coaching.
Oh, she's not done. There she goes.
That's awesome.
So this is just an example of like you're not getting a paper home, like a worksheet in the.
I love
You're getting
that.
I'd rather have this.
You get this home and you scan it and then you can watch your child's video and all the video.
All right,
And,
let's do kindergarten.
So who's, Mrs. Flanagan's responsible for doing
no,
this?
Don McDonald in the
Format
computer lab.
and,
The
Impressive.
TA in the computer lab does this in the classes. Okay, I told you it'd be worth it. Sorry, that was me.
Let's hold the parents over.
Good
Because you're gonna scan it with your phone.
Thank you, team. Like there was like 8 people. maybe
Yeah.
half.
There are Halloween ones too.
Good job, you guys.
Okay, moving on to board forum. And I would like to address your attention, or direct your attention to the table over there, where we have multiple toys that are being made for Jim Perkins' class. And this is, I think, Toys for Tots, right? So, and I think there's what?
And a cutting board.
60 or 70 of them at this point?
I'm saying there's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, well, yes.
I would like to just tag along to one thing Jean sort of mentioned at the end of her report, and that is that recently, well, both in our, on our Food Services Committee meeting, Beth mentioned that the number of, the free and reduced lunch number has gone up significantly. And I was speaking with some friends the other day who work with the Christmas Bureau, and they have really just been besieged with requests this year. And I think the number of people living in poverty at this point in time in our community is really increasing. And I just hope we can all keep that in mind and remember them all over the holiday season and do whatever we can.
We have many programs that support our families.
You have
We
a
the Christmas
ton.
Bureau, we have the ALPS program, and we have local donors who just donate things.
You have your hat and mitten drive, you have the food bank
Oh,
drive,
we do
there's the
tons of things, I
SPCA
know.
drive.
The NHS is doing a coat, hat, coat drive.
Yeah. Good. I'm just
It's nice
trying
to
to
see the
draw
kids
attention
involved
to
in
the
that.
fact that it
Mhm.
is very real in this community. It may not be very visible, but it's there, and it is a problem.
Well, and you're, for the first time, the elementary school is doing, the toy
The
sale.
rummage sale,
So,
yeah.
the community they're collecting from the community, used toys, home goods, yes, you can take all your stuff. to the elementary
You can
school. I
see
know,
the wheels
yeah.
going.
Right, and then,
Empty the
having that as a sale where kids are able to purchase things for, 25 cents for their
Yeah.
siblings, for their parents, just a
Cool.
nice experience for them and
When is that?
affordable.
That's
You can
next
turn in
Monday.
your donations for the next week or so,
Till
and
Friday.
kids shop on,
Monday and
20th
Tuesday.
21st.
And everything, so once the child has picked something for their family members, then we help them wrap everything. We have wrapping paper and tags, and so they have gifts to give their family.
And all the proceeds are going
The PTO,
There
and
you go,
then
you
to
just-
support our kids.
Well, I asked Jim if we could just sort of take a look at them, because I think that this tradition has been going on for about 72 years. So Twinsburg has a long history of being able to.
And many of you know Nikki Clark, who is a retired teacher, who
Yes.
still comes, she's been coming in and working with Jim and the kids
Yeah.
regularly
Really
for the
wants
last
to-
few weeks.
She's basically said that's been the most fun she's had in a long time. No lesson plan, she just gets to hang out with the kids. So,
I can understand that.
okay, yes ma'am?
I just want to confirm our board retreat for the
For
20th.
20th, right,
Um,
5 to 7 p.m.
5 to 7.
Okay, have you got?
For
real?
Back?
You picked the date?
Yep.
Yep.
December
December.
20th, next Tuesday from 5 to 7. I'm assuming we'll be here.
Yes.
You want it in this room? I think that's fine.
Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, is it catered?
Is what?
Is it catered?
Is it is it catered?
Is it Tunis?
The-
You can pass it.
Getting the date was the big thing. All the food
No, the
arrangements, the
food
little
is the
things.
big.
No, the big thing is the date, Frank. Getting you all together, that's critical, so.
Okay, and.
Did you send, can you send it?
Did you know?
I just confirmed
It's
it.
official?
Yep, it's official.
Right.
Okay.
And in view of that, I'm going to pass this down. You have some homework to do. This is information regarding, and if you'd also take a quick look at, once again, policy regarding the board. So these are just a few policies that I thought pull out that you have.
Are you gonna send these to us electronically?
I can certainly do that.
Give them to me, I need to send it to John anyway.
Okay.
So I'm gonna send it to everyone if you want.
Okay. Okay.
And can I make another motion? Can we stop getting this tome? Can we get this electronically? Is there a reason why you have to have a hard
You
copy of
can,
this?
it's not a searchable document though, I think that's why we've never.
It's not a searchable document?
That's because they want to sell you those.
It's a disc that you can't search?
That's right.
Aye.
Oh, that's.
How can that be? If you open it preview?
It's because they make huge amounts of dollars selling the book.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Everybody's eating at the trunk.
Okay.
Yeah, if you don't want
I will need to entertain a motion to go into executive session. However, before we do that, can we just simply say to our staff and administrators?
Trinkets.
I will stay stopped.
Oh, did you have a question, Michelle?
No, I'm listening.
Can we focus here?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Waiting for Fran. Okay. All right, so as I said, I'll need it to entertain a motion for the executive committee, but before that, I would like to say to our staff and to our teachers and to the rest of the community, our very best wishes for a very happy, family-filled holiday season.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
So moved. Executive session.
Excellent. And now for the holidays.
And for the holidays.